Actually, I know the tour's still on, but the Ashes have been lost. What sort of review are you expecting into this tour? What sort of review do you anticipate conducting into it?
Well, we will review the tour, obviously, and we'll do a full review. Everything will be on the table, and we'll do that at the end of this tour. We've got 2 test matches left. The Ashes may be lost, but we've got 2 matches we can make an impact on, and we've got to try to.
Yeah. Do you have clear ideas about how you can take this test team forward, improve it?
Look, we'll do a full review at the end of this period. There's obviously been a lot spoken about already, and there's a lot more to come, but I'd like the team and us for now to concentrate on these 2 matches.
But you yourself, I mean, do you privately have clear ideas about what you could do to change this team and improve England's fortunes?
Yeah, I think across the game I've got some pretty clear ideas of how we can take this team forward and improve our red ball cricket, and we'll share those in good time.
Did Chris Silverwood come to you and say, I want to be in charge, or was that your idea? In terms of team selection, I want autonomy over team selection.
It's something we spoke about, obviously. I know it's something that's been mentioned a lot in the media. I do read the media, not all of it, but I have a great deal of respect for much of what's written. In terms of the national selector situation, at the time I said the main reason I wanted to give more responsibility and more accountability to the England head coach. I think we've done that. Now, in terms of how that operates on tour during series, we should know by now, because we've talked about it enough, that the England coach and the captain decide which 11 goes onto the field. So that hasn't changed. Conversations may have happened between the national selector and the head coach. That still happens between the head scout and the group of coaches we have, and we have a number of very experienced coaches here or at home, with myself, etc. So those conversations still happen, but the ultimate responsibility belongs to the coach and the captain when they take that team on.
And that's something that he definitely wanted. He came to, I'm really happy, I want that. Always, I mean, I was trying to work out sort of the balance of power.
I didn't say that. I said
I'm trying to work out the balance of power. We discussed it. Yeah. But so was it something
that you wanted? To take it on.
Was it something you wanted or he wanted?
We discussed it. I thought it was a good idea. Clearly, I'm in charge. And Chris was very much happy to run with it.
Yeah. And is it something that you think you'll continue with?
We'll review everything at the end of this series, as I said, so we're not going to go into that.
Yeah. But what about this idea that if you're a player and the head coach is a sort of confidant, if you like, well, it can be a confidant. You can go to the head coach and say, look, I've got a problem with my game, whatever. But if he's also the main selector as well, there's sort of, for the player, there might be a bit of a conflict of interest. And this is not something that's come from in the media. It's come from actually Alistair Cook said it, former England captain. So you're coming someone who's vastly experienced within the game. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting viewpoint. So I guess one of the criticisms I've had during my time, my career, whenever, is a lack of innovation, lack of forward thinking. And now we're talking about going back to a system that is, I consider, pretty antiquated and about 150 years old. So, in what other sport would we have someone sitting on the outside who would be telling the head coach what he should be doing? These are professional environments. They're not supposed to be cosy. Yes, you build relationships, but ultimately it's a performance game. So I don't totally agree with that opinion. And I think the head coach can still have those relationships in the dressing room, but we've been accused in the past perhaps of being too cosy, too soft. I don't agree with that.
I suppose it's the idea of there being more opinions and challenging the one central opinion.
Well, we've got that. As I just talked about, we've got a group of elite coaches. We've got 2 very experienced assistant coaches. We've got a head scout. We've got a group of scouts. We've got me. That challenge is always there. If you're talking about, so let's go into tour-specific selection. I've not really heard anyone else talk about anyone we've left behind that should be here. If we talk about match-specific selection, well, I've heard a lot of talk about what bowling attack we should have played. That's subjective. And ultimately that comes down to the coach and the captain, who they take on the field. And they may reflect after the series and say, well, look, did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? But let's look at the facts as well. Whatever bowling attack we'd taken on the field, with first innings scores of 147, 236, 185, we're not winning many Test matches in Australia. So, let's focus on what's important.
Do you think mistakes have been made in terms of selection?
That is hindsight. It's all easy to be an armchair selector. I fully support everything that Joe and Chris do, clearly, and the teams they've taken on the field. But in reflection, I think it's a question for them.
So, just moving on. I mean, do you believe that the English game needs a reset in terms of its red ball cricket? There was a sort of reset in 2015, wasn't there, with the white ball team? Do you think there needs to be a red ball reset? And I wonder what that would look like.
Look, so we've come here in 34 years and won once. Okay. Being here now in this position, I absolutely feel the responsibility of losing this Ashes series. Absolutely, and we all do. And we can only apologise, and I know there'll be a lot of emotion, a lot of anger about how we've lost it. But we know it's not an easy place to come. We can't kid ourselves. There's been a lot more gone on in the last 2 years than just performance. So my responsibility, whilst it is the performance of the team, it feels very much that it's also been keeping the game on, getting the team on a plane, making sure the India series happens, the South Africa situation, the Pakistan situation, discrimination in sport. So it's been an extraordinary year, and I think we can look at the cricket specific stuff, but we also have to look at the other stuff, and particularly having 18 scheduled Test matches between January and mid-January is a hell of a lot of cricket. It's almost 3 times as much as, or over that period in total cricket, almost 3 times as much as Australia. 50% more than India. It's a huge amount of cricket we're playing. And in a time of COVID, it's been pretty horrendous at times. And what these guys have tried to deliver, I think, is extraordinary. Not always on the field. So don't print that headline that I think is extraordinary what we've done. What they've delivered in terms of the cricket, getting it on, has been extraordinary. Our performances on the field, not always great. And we've got to work on that. From a cricket-specific point of view, I do think there are things we can do. We have to look internally. We have to look at ourselves, and that will be part of the review. So what do we do when these players enter our dressing room? How are we improving them? What are we doing to help them? But let's also not forget the first year of Chris's time as head coach. We won in South Africa, we beat the West Indies, beat Pakistan, won in Sri Lanka. A good start. Okay, this last year has been much tougher. 16 out of 18 Test matches played against the top 3 sides in the world. Okay, so that's some mitigation. 9 of them abroad, out of 14 against Australia and India, and we know what our records are in those countries. Okay, so but take it. That's the black and white. We've not done well in terms of results. 4 out of 15 is not good. Okay, in the 90s, that was accepted as normal. For England leaderships, that was what they did, and they got away with it. We set our standards much higher than that. Okay. Other things we can do. Look, I think we've got to work, and this isn't where I blame the county game, because I don't think we can. Our players come from the county game, and we have some very good players. Okay, and we have some extraordinary good white ball players, as we've shown. But I think we've got to work collectively and collaboratively on how we lessen that gap between what we do and what the very best teams in the world do. Okay? So if you look at that more specifically, we know coming to Australia or going to India, we've got to get runs on the board. We've got to consistently, when pitches allow, get runs on the board. We've got to have a spin resource that allows us to bowl far more overs of spin, because that's what happens in Test cricket. And we need a variation in our bowling attack, but we need pace. Got to have bowlers who can bowl 87 mile an hour plus. So we know those things. Have we been able to fill all those gaps? No, we haven't, and we take that. We take that. But if that's a failing of this leadership, it's been failing of many leaderships before as well. So as I said, are we creating the conditions in the game that will allow us to better prepare our cricketers to play in these conditions here? I'm not sure we are at the moment. What we play, when we play, on what we play, and again, that's a collective responsibility. It's up to us as ECB, but also a conversation for us to have with the counties.
You've apologised. I mean, you said it yourself. You apologised. What about your? I mean, there'll be lots of speculation. Inevitably, there always is after an Ashes series about the coach, captain, whatever. What about your own position, Ashley? Do you intend to continue? Is it your intention to continue? Do you want to continue? Do you think you should continue?
A lot of questions there, Simon. This last 2 years has probably been the most challenging in my career, and probably learnt most as well, because, as I said, performance has almost been the last thing we've had to think about, and that's a really sad situation. How much time have we really had to sit back and think strategically? Not a lot. But have we got the game on? Have we tried to keep players fit and well? Yes, we've tried. And the well-being issue is a massive one. I've heard so much about rest and rotation and about our responsibility to that. Just forget the words, forget what it's called. We're trying to keep our people well. Okay, so whether we played them in any of the T20 cricket that was happening, any of the white ball cricket, and we couldn't possibly have played them in all the Test cricket still. The amount of time these guys are spending bubbles during this period is simply not healthy. You guys would have done it, but it's not healthy, and we're seeing that through our team. But I tell you what, I'm extremely proud of how they go about it. Very little whinge. They get on with it. They get pushed and pulled everywhere. They get things stuck up their nose all the time, and they just get on with it. But it's extremely difficult. Now, in terms of my position, look, it's not for me to decide, but you clearly tell by the way I'm talking that I'm thinking very much about the future and how we take this team forward.
Yeah. It's not going to change, though, is it? I mean, look at the schedule for next year. It seems just as intense.
It is, and we've got to look at it. We've got to look at the schedule, in the long run. Absolutely, it is a problem, and we've got to find a balance, because whilst we're playing, that balance against amount of cricket with the quality of cricket, and making sure we look after our people, and that's the coaches, players, everyone. And coming back to that well-being piece, let's focus on that, not rest and rotation. It's ridiculous to think these guys could play in every single game. And we started this cycle. When I came into the job, I think we were 5th in the world in Test cricket, 3rd in the world in T20 cricket, and number 1 in the world in ODIs. We're now 4th, 1st in T20 and 2nd in ODIs. We made a strategic switch with ODI and T20 because we know being number 1 in the world is important when you go into a World Cup. And we absolutely wanted to address the balance of red ball cricket. Have we managed that? No, not totally. But I've talked about all of those reasons. And we sort of are at our level. 4th in the world is probably where we are. We're beating the sides below us, but in these conditions, we're not beating the sides above us.
The English game is well resourced enough, though, to go beyond that, isn't it? 4th, it's
we've absolutely got to think that. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and that's what we're aiming for. But I think unless we look at more systemic change and a collective responsibility and collective solutions, we can make whatever changes you want. You can change me, we can change the head coach, and change the captain, but we're only setting up future leaders for failure. That's all we're doing. It's already pushing it down the road.
Stephen Finn alongside. We're listening to that. We didn't really have a chance to chat about it earlier because lots of things that Ashley Giles was talking about there, full of interest. And it's got a lot of play, and the last day or so, all the newspapers have written up the story as well. We looked at some of the things that Ashley Giles was talking about. I mean, a couple of things you were interested in yesterday, because we were discussing the interview and some of the topics that could come up. And one of the things that you were talking about was about the idea of who decided that it was best to go to sort of one person in charge, and that was Chris Silverwood, and Ashley Giles there sort of eventually, I think, saying that it was his decision. It seemed like it. I mean, What do you think about that? The idea of one person being in charge. I mean, Ashley was saying, well, it's antiquated. The old system where there was a sort of selectorial panel, and it doesn't happen in other sports. And I presume football is what he was talking about, where the manager selects the team.
There's still heads of recruitment in. I mean, you hear a lot of times that the manager wasn't consulted when a player was signed, or there seems as though there's a lot of levels of infrastructure, and you'd imagine that a manager in football terms is there giving instructions from the sideline saying move here, move there, whereas the cricket is run by the captain on the field. The coach is there, in my opinion, to set an environment, especially at international level, is set an environment where he can gel the group of players together and make them comfortable.
How does he do that? Give us an insight in how he does that. So a couple of practicalities, 2 or 3 practicalities.
Well, I think first and foremost you have to get a feel for what your squad is, and if you're a group of senior players who need to be pushed and challenged and have their buttons pushed, then your style of doing that would be very different to some talented guys who are trying to feel their way into the game, and are having to learn on the job a little bit, which is what I see with the younger players in this team, albeit that is caveated with some far more experienced players as well. But I personally, the best dressing rooms that I have played in have been the ones where the coach almost has a laissez-faire approach to coaching, where he says relax, and he just gets you to relax and forget about the consequences of playing international sport and international cricket, and feel comfortable, fully comfortable going out there and being yourselves. And I think that resonates with young people today. I think young people today's attitude towards life in general and performance in sport is way different to what it was 20 or 30 years ago, where I even when I started playing cricket when I was 15, 16 in the Middlesex second team, your coach and the captain, they'd be on you all the time. They'd say, that's not good enough, you're robbing a living, think you're a professional cricketer and you can perform like that, you're a complete joke. And that's just gone out the game now. However much people love to think that sports dressing rooms are like that now, it doesn't work. I don't think Chris Silverwood has that approach at all to it. And from what I saw and what I knew of him at Essex, he creates an environment where the guys were comfortable to go out there and be themselves, and it led to them winning lots of championships and T20 stuff, and it almost left a legacy there. So the reason why I was so interested in that element of the interview was because I think for the England team to move forward now, I think it's really important that there's a differentiation between the coaching role, where the coach is there to make the players feel comfortable, and part of that, as Alistair Cook mentioned in his column this week, and I think I spoke about it during the last test match, at the end of the last test match, if you don't feel comfortable about going up to a coach and being vulnerable whilst you're on tour for 3 months, and I think that's the differing factor between...
So how would vulnerable sound? You say, I've got to the coach and say, I don't feel very confident, I'm out of form, I really worry about how I'm bowling or how I'm batting or whatever.
I think it's more just like, it's something about, it brings you closer together by being vulnerable to someone, definitely. So if you go up to your head coach and you say, look coach, I'm not 100% in great rhythm here, like, how are we going to help me? How can you help me get out of this? And can we put a plan together to make sure that by the time the next test match comes around, I'm 100% ready to go out there and perform for you? And that's the question that I would ask as a player to a coach. And I just wonder whether it would mean that a player might not approach the coach in the same manner with the same amount of vulnerability if you know that he's deciding 100% on what the next touring party is going to be, or what the makeup of the next test side is exactly going to be, without the consultation.
So you just keep quiet, you bottle it all up.
I think basically. You would bottle it up, yeah, and that's what I would do, but that's my character. This dressing room might be different. Like, I know quite a lot of the guys in there, but I've not shared a dressing room with them for quite a while, so I don't know exactly what they would be like within the four walls of a dressing room. But I know the dressing rooms that I've played in recently, if you're shut off from a coach and if you don't feel as though you can approach him, it just creates an environment where you find it hard to go out there and feel comfortable performing. And I know that sounds ridiculous probably to a lot of people at home, and you paid money to go and play cricket, and you're the best, you've been selected as the best in the country. But I do think that cricket itself, and Ashley Giles alluded to it in his interview with you there, especially in the last 2 years with the elements of bubble life and being with the same people all the time, and not having a break from it, you lose your perspective on things, and it can be difficult. And if you haven't got the outlet to be able to express those vulnerabilities to a coach because you're scared that it might affect future selection or your chances of playing international cricket in the future, then that's going to be detrimental to your performance. So I just wonder, looking from the outside in, again, I've got no information from within the dressing room, so I don't know, but it's just me making assumptions from what I see. And I wonder whether the review that has been commissioned, or will be commissioned, obviously, as part of reviewing why England lost the Ashes so quickly and so heavily this series, that is not. I'd be very surprised if that's not one of the things that are looked at, just because of the nature of a head coach's role in cricket is so different to any other sport.
Well, I mean, Ashley there, he seemed to be saying, well, as long as I'm in charge, that's sort of the way it's going to be, because I think that's the way to do it. That was my reading of it. Of course, the other question is whether he is going to be in charge. He made the point there, you can sack the coach, you can sack the captain, you can sack the administrators, whatever, but unless you almost fundamentally change the game, you're going to get the same results, because we've been having these results in Australia. 8 out of the last 9 series England have lost here. So there are sort of 2 issues, aren't there? There's the immediate short-term personnel issues, and then there's the development of the production and development of player issues,
which I think is probably the major issue, if we're being honest. With and I also think injuries have not helped England. Stone and Archer being injured for this series has no doubt significantly impacted their ability to have diversity of angles and trajectories and pace in their bowling attack, which you almost certainly need to be successful here in Australia. But yeah, I just found it a really interesting interview, and I also think that I don't think a clean sweep of coach, captain, director of cricket, I don't think that's the way forward, because then you just start again, and if you don't, without addressing the things that are fundamentally wrong, well, not wrong, but that are hindering England's progress when being able to come and try and challenge teams in their own environment, in Australia, in India. It's that production line of players who are capable of dealing with the pressure and the conditions that are thrown upon them, which is very, very hard to do at the moment with the structure the way it is in England. So I think it would be foolish if everyone was to be wiped out, because then the learnings and the experiences that people have had over the last 2 years are just for nothing almost, and you're looking to start again, which it doesn't quite feel right to me.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes personnel change does make a difference. New head coach could make a difference, new captain could make a difference. It has happened in the past, but there are, as he said, and I think most people agree with, there are systemic changes. He did say COVID has been a massive thing in the whole sort of background to what's happened this year and on this tour as well. It actually, I came away from the interview thinking, it reminded me of, you probably don't know this name, but John Pullin, who was the former Bristol hooker and England captain, rugby union captain in the 1970s, and a British Lion as well. And he went with England to Dublin in 1973, and he gave a speech. I think the title of his autobiography. He died fairly recently, and he said, one of the things he said, and it's become sort of folklore really. So we might not be very good, but at least we turn up. And there was sort of an element of that with Ashley's interview. You've got to focus on the fact, look what we've been through, but we have fulfilled our fixtures. We have these reciprocal agreements. We want people, and they haven't always turned up. Little caveat: Pakistan, for example, and and they left from South Africa as well. But that was in a different time when people didn't know the severity of COVID. They didn't have vaccines. They could have been trapped there for Christmas if some of the players had caught it. So and they are going to go back, and they are going to go back to Pakistan and play those fixtures as well. Let's hope so, anyway. Although that just leads on to how big how intense the schedule is going to be, and get results to let people know actually how intense the schedule is going to be. But clearly COVID, and I get you. I think we sense this just talking to some of the players. Graham Thorpe did an interview with him yesterday. I got a sense from him as well that sort of behind the scenes, the whole COVID thing, and Stuart Broad in his newspaper column saying, we were supposed to, like, the second night of a test match, and all we were concentrating on was like who was going to, we have to move hotel rooms, who was going to go into which room, who would, we've just come back from a day at the Test cricket, and it's musical chairs in the hotel.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 11 days in isolation in Adelaide, and that was enough for me. And these guys have done it multiple times over the last 2 years, whilst also trying to prepare and get your head in the right space to go and play international cricket against teams in their own environments. There's absolutely no doubt that has some part to play in how things have gone down here, and the fatigue of being in those environments and those situations. I mean, I just can't describe how much these guys have had to do it, and how much is obviously expected of them in terms of performance and in terms of just getting out there and playing cricket all the time. And they have done that, and they deserve commendation for doing that, definitely. And I don't envy them whatsoever for being able to or having had to go through that.
Yeah. What about England's playing schedule? Andy Zaltzman is with us as well. It's 30 for no wicket, by the way. Players took an early lunch. Play will resume in 5 minutes' time, which is good news. It is dry at the moment, so fingers crossed for some more cricket soon. England's playing schedule in the last year. England's playing schedule in the next year. I said to Ashley Giles at the end of the interview, it's not going to change. And actually it's not in the near future.
Since gone back to February 2020, so when COVID's sort of fully became a global crisis, England have played 22 tests since then. Australia just 8, that's including this one. But other teams have played a reasonable amount. India 19, West Indies 15, Pakistan 14. England were already playing more test cricket than other countries. In the previous 2 years they played 27 tests. Australia were the next most with 22. So England have been sort of filling their calendar more than other teams. That just test, not even taking into account white ball cricket. For the rest of this year, after this Ashes, they have a 3-test series in West Indies. They have a 5-match T20 series beginning very soon.
The Ashes finish basically, and the white ball players are off. Well, the ones who are not in this series, none of the Ashes players, like Ben Stokes, for example, who might get an England's T20 team, he is not going to the West Indies, but an England team is going to the West Indies.
Then the home summer in tests is 3 tests against New Zealand. They had a 2-test series hastily put in last summer to fill a gap in the schedule. 3 tests with New Zealand, the rearranged 5th test against India, and then 3 tests against South Africa, which will be another testing summer for England's batters. South Africa, not a great batting side at the moment, but they have a strong pack of bowlers. Then England have a white ball tour of Pakistan, the T20 World Cup. One page I'm looking at suggests a white ball tour of Australia and 3 tests in Pakistan.
Yeah, that's right.
As well. So that's a lot of cricket, and it's an issue in the global game with the proliferation and expansion of T20 leagues and new formats, and come back to that golden goose. If you keep squeezing it, beware what emerges.
And also next winter, I understand there's a tour to New Zealand after Christmas or in the new year, and they've also got to make up a South Africa one-day series that I mentioned, the one they came home from, 3-match one-day series, and there's a tour of Bangladesh for some one-days as well.
I think they might be playing a couple of them via Skype.
And we play them on Zoom.
We should also say, I mean, this is not a completely new thing. In 1930, England were playing simultaneous test matches in the West Indies and New Zealand. Cricket was rather different then, but there were 2 test matches going on at the same time involving England.
Yeah, the other thing as well these days, of course, with the way the World Cup is formatted, you have to play those. You can't just sort of send a second team for a one-day tournament, because you lose all your one-days. You have to qualify for the World Cup. You end up playing even more matches. Anyway, so the schedule is packed. COVID doesn't look as if it's going away in the near future, so that's clearly going to be an issue for the players. Although, I mean, it is worth saying it has been freer last summer and on this tour than it was previously, where the players were sort of locked down in bubbles. And you think of summer before last in the UK, when it was just, you were locked into your hotel and they threw away the key for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. So and the players have been allowed to go out here in Australia, but restrictions have been increased as time has gone on because of the situation in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah, I think the people above, I think Cricket Australia have asked the players not to go out and not to go and do anything, I think, which again, as part of just being here for so long, you have to escape from the game.